Welcome to KPFT's coverage of Super Tuesday. My name is Egberto Willies. I'm the host of Politics Done Right every Tuesday at 3 p.m. And I'm here with Dr. Franklin Jones. We're going to have a whole lot of talk about this election, not only locally, but nationally. And we have some interesting things, some interesting outlooks that we're going to have about this subject. Dr. Jones, welcome aboard.
Thank you for inviting me here.
Well, I mean, I think we ought to have a little bit of fun tonight in what is turning out to be an election that no one thought was possible. It almost seems like folks doubled down and said we are going to will who we want to be the candidate for the Democratic Party. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that what we're seeing tonight is something that was expected before the season began. The notions were that Biden was going to be the leading candidate, that Sanders was going to be the voice for those folks who were just getting involved in the election process and who were talking about moving toward a more progressive agenda. And I think after we saw a lot of the people who were in the race beginning to fall out, that battle between, quote, Biden and his wing of the party and the wing of the political party that Sanders supposedly represents, just has come to the pass.
Now, I know you say that, right? But I kind of have an interesting feeling about the election. And we're starting nationally, folks, because, again, Texas is there are still people in the line throughout Texas.
Right.
TSU, West Gray, here in Harris County. In Austin, the lines are wrapped around. They're still trying to get folks in. So since we have a whole lot of national results, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that.
Right, but let's say something first about these long lines in Texas.
Yes.
You have to recall that over the last 2 years, the state of Texas has gotten rid of a number of polling locations, particularly ones that were in minority communities.
And tell us
so
why.
This whole notion of suppressing the vote, which was a key strategy on the part of Republicans, not only in Texas but in other places, is that this will increase their chances of winning by lowering the number of possibilities for folks who were Black, Latino, and others to actually vote in races, and also those progressive forces they sought. So it should begin to reduce the number of opportunities for people to vote, and you've targeted where you're making those reductions, you're really increasing the chances of the other side to win.
Absolutely so, and that is exactly what's happening, not only in Texas, but in many of the other states that we call the red states. But ironically speaking, I don't know how much, while that is true, I don't know how much that may not be happening, even in some blue states where other undesirables undesirables for the plutocracy may be. Your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, the whole notion that voting is a right has to be abused because it's really a privilege. And those folks who are in charge of making the rules make the rules to benefit themselves. And when it is in their interest to have an expanding electorate, they will move toward that. When it's interest to having a smaller electorate, they will move toward that. And so the history is very clear in terms of no matter who is in power, they will make those decisions that is in their particular interest.
No, and that really is irrespective of party, correct?
Correct.
Now let me just kind of go to national. We're taking a look at what the national news right now. Mm-hmm. Now, Doctor, let me ask you a question because we know what the polls said previous to South Carolina. Before we get into the rationale or the reasoning of what occurred in South Carolina, do you really think there is a possibility that you get that sort of a swing from a vote in a small whose catalyst was a vote in a small state?
Well, if you really pay a little bit more attention to the polls, one of the largest areas in almost all these polls was the number of undecided votes.
Right.
And it was making these projections on the number of people that said who were likely to vote, who said they were going to vote. And so you had this large number of people who said they had not made up their minds yet.
Right.
And so it's not difficult to see that it was a big gap between what was being reported in those earlier polls and what was actually happening on election day. Another thing, too, is that more and more we're seeing now that people don't necessarily respect some of the polls, and so they may not necessarily tell the pollsters what the actual choices are.
Right.
And then when the voting actually comes out, it becomes different. I'm always talking about what I call the Bradley effect.
I remember that
Right.
from
About
the
15
mayor of Los
Los
Angeles.
Angeles, right.
Yeah.
And there's about a 15-point gap between what people said they were going to do and what they actually did. And so I'm always mindful of that when I look at polls, particularly in the highly contested elections and elections where they talk a lot about the role of race and the importance of the elections showing there is no racial issue and that it's simply a matter of people making a choice as to who is the better candidate, blah, 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 those kinds of things. And so I think what we saw happening in South Carolina, in my mind, was an example of a large number of folks who had not said who they were going to vote for, a large number of people who were leaning but still did not say who they were going to vote for. And they just simply came out and did what they were expected to do prior to the polls.
Now let's go a little bit deeper here because I have another thing. Don't you think it makes a difference as well that when you have a corporate control media with an agenda that after you get a win in a small state turns it into a 24/7 ad for you, making you seem to be inevitable?
Oh, they did that. And not only that, was that they decided to attack Biden before the actual primary in terms of saying who he was and what was happening and how I'm sorry, attack Sanders, saying who he was and this whole notion of socialism versus capitalism or whatever. It was a kind of Red Scare kind of tactic that was going on,
right?
And it kept suggesting that he was not the kind of person that, quote, certain kind of people want to have.
Right.
And so once they had laid that predicate down, then when they got the results, they saw that as a validation of what they were saying. And so at that point, they then decided, okay, we have our leader now, and we're going to push to try to make certain that if anyone was doubtful about this fella, they now know that he's not a good fellow.
Yeah, and it is a type of manipulation, and I mean it's ironic because that is what many accuse, let's say, some of the outsiders of doing during the 2016 election, and here we are, and in this case, Hillary v. Trump. And in this case, it turns out that it's done in the other. Now, we still don't have results in Texas, and it seems like a lot of Texas things are still going. But one of our perennial candidates I noticed here seemed to have avoided a runoff, Sheila Jackson Lee, here in Houston. Folks, for those of you that are listening nationally, we'll kind of go into some of the other national campaigns as well. Now, when we look at where the state of the election is, it seems like the theory was that at the end of tonight, Bernie Sanders would have had a large quantity of delegates over Biden. If these numbers that we are seeing continue, it may be a wash, or who knows? It could, I mean, we don't know what direction this is going to happen. I don't think I've ever seen, from the time I've been in this country watching these types of elections, such a transformation in 2 days. I am not sure how this is to be interpreted. I am not sure if this is saying we have a fickle-minded constituency, if we have some other type of dynamics that I don't understand, but I don't think you move masses with this speed unless we have one of these types of issues, if you will.
Right. Well, I think a lot of it had to deal with the punditry class, right?
Say that again?
A lot had to do with the punditry class.
Yes.
Is that things were a lot different than what was being projected.
Right.
I mean, for example, the whole notion that Biden was completely out of it, was one thing that was being pushed. The notion that you had, Bloomberg and the other folks who were, really doing these kinds of things that were going to attract people.
Right.
Again, without getting statements from actual voters themselves as to what they were going to do. I think that the voters were completely unready, for what was being projected as what was going on. And so when you saw this what happened in South Carolina, as some kind of manifestation of what was going to happen in the future. I mean, can you think of this? Is that they are now saying that black folks saved both Biden and the Democratic Party.
Yes.
And all the praises to black folks for setting America on the right path, right? And so now the rest of the South and the United States can follow the lead of these black folks in terms of turning this around and saving us from this ungodly socialist kind of movement that appears to be developing. Now, if you go back to 1968, and where we saw the development of the Black Power movement, and we saw the development of the counterculture movement of who are now the baby boomers who are pushing all that kind of nonsense. Right. We saw the same kind of shock and surprise about what was going on, and this idea that we have to somehow wrestle away from this wave of change that's coming forth,
right,
and bring about a Nixon administration, which was a movement that was designed to try to stamp down all this progressiveness that was coming on at that time, right? And so I think you can make a parallel in terms of what was actually going on now. There was a possibility of millennials beginning to raise questions about what their parents or grandparents were doing and the direction of the United States.
Legitimately so.
Right? Yes. And so now what is happening is that, well, we like you young folks, but we want to make sure that you kind of stay in your place because you don't have enough information and knowledge to make the decisions about where this country should be going. And so I think that all this is much greater than the quote Biden versus Sanders race for the presidency.
You're saying that is just a manifestation of something that is much deeper
of this greater fight for where the United States is going,
right?
And what young people are saying that the United States has failed us in this regard, and we're going to try to write it as we defined it, write it to make it a better place.
But to do that, you have to convince older Gen Xers, you have to convince baby boomers that they are actually fighting for something just, and not only something just, but something that will make them economically stable. You and I both know that the path that we're on is actually a path of economic disaster for all but the very top of this country.
But I guess the other thing is that when you start talking about systemic change, it's not going to be any kind of mass-based movement, right? I mean, there's going to be a sort of cadre,
right,
that leads this particular struggle. And the question is, how can this cadre convince socialize enough people that they need to move in this kind of direction?
And that's I think that is the question. Because we thought, we look at somebody like Bernie Sanders, and we see the movement that he's making with millennials. And it is a movement. I mean, I've seen it since 2015. It is really a movement. You don't raise hundreds of millions of dollars from 20 million people if you don't have a movement. The question is, as you placed it, how does the movement grow to something that the plutocracy itself doesn't control? Because as it is, with them having control of the media, you see what happened with South Carolina. Black folks in South Carolina was pretty much, I hate to just put it this way, but they were used. Okay, and the con continued throughout. If we want, when the past, what's his name? The guy that was Clinton's protege, James Carville. When James Carville has the gall to come on TV and says, "Thank you, black people, for saving the Democratic Party," and black women have been saying for a long time they were the heart of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, look at the leadership of the Democratic Party. Look at the things the Democratic Party stands for. None of these particular issues, none of these particular deeds, none of these particular policies are there to enhance the people that need it the most, black people, people of color, etc. Yet they are the ones who save the party, and yet the policies that Biden says he wants to bring are not the policies that are going to help the people who is going to likely help him to get into power if he's lucky to do so.
Right. The two major political parties are not about making systemic change in the United States.
Right, absolutely.
We have to understand. They are both sides of the same coin.
Right.
We begin to talk about the whole question of contesting for power and contesting for systemic change. And when you begin to, if you are an out group,
Right.
and you're trying to liberate yourselves, and you're liberating yourselves inside of the rules that have been designed by the person who is in fact oppressing you, right? You're not going to go very far. I mean, for the whole example, the big question now about how successful Sanders has been in terms of raising monies to help pay for this particular campaign, which is a system that is based upon the money, and quite frankly, he cannot compete
with the corporate dollars,
big money, right?
Right.
And so you're bound to find yourself in this position where you're simply making minor changes
on the edges,
right?
Right.
And so that fundamentally what's necessary for the liberation of people in the United States, right, is not going to go through, these two political parties challenging one another. There will be differences in terms of...
Wait. Explain that. You said systemic change cannot occur.
Both of these political parties are capitalist political parties.
Yes.
Right? They're designed to promote the development of a capitalist society in the United States.
Right.
They both make decisions on what they're willing to give up in order to maintain their position of power without,
substantially changing.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And so what they've both been very successful in doing has been able to socialize the masses of people in the United States that this is the correct way to go in terms of trying to make yourself to receive the maximum amount of benefits you can from the society. And so that is what is happening. And some folks get goodies, other folks don't, right? Enough folks get goodies that they are ready to vamp on those folks who don't have them, who are trying
I
to
call
make
them the
changes
guardians of the gate. You only need a few guardians. If you have a strong gate, you only need a few guardians of the gate.
Right. And so what we're seeing is that we're not talking about systemic change. We are talking about making modest adjustments that in no way will transform the power arrangement inside the United States.
Right. We still don't have numbers, but what we do have is that that Biden is racking up the South. Bernie has won Colorado and his home state of Vermont. Massachusetts, can you believe, is so far going to not called, but so far Biden is winning in Massachusetts, followed by Bernie.
And
Elizabeth
is coming in third, right?
Yeah.
And I mean there are a bunch of other dynamics that play in terms of people making choices about gender in this race, and quote the whole electability question that was thrown out there, and what had happened to what Trump did to Hillary in the last time. That has some problems. We still a society where we don't really respect the role of women in our society.
We don't.
Right. And so what we talk a lot about, breaking glass ceilings and doing all this kind of stuff, but fundamentally, that the whole notion of maintaining male superiority is there. I mean, we look at the difference in terms of the black male vote and the black female vote.
Yeah.
And we look at the more progressive
look at
voters,
this.
Right? The more progressive voters are black women.
Minnesota won by Biden.
Right. And of course, Minnesota used to be this bastion of liberalism that even though Klobuchar resigned, decided not to write, her name was still on the ballot, right?
Well, Klobuchar votes went to Biden likely, but ironically speaking, it used to be the bastion of. I am flabbergasted now. I mean, I don't see. This was a calculated transformation. And the thing about it, Dr. Jones, I tell you, is I think the implications of this is deeper than I think the idea behind this is to break the faith of the millennials that they have any power to do anything by this sort of a con.
It's going to challenge them to figure out how they want to struggle.
Yes.
Right? And if the if the struggle does not get beyond, I'm going to register to vote and try to find somebody who looks like me to vote for, then they lose, right? I mean, the thing now is, how do you take this and develop a mass-based struggle beyond, quote, voting? Because if you're challenging for political power, if you're trying to change the system, it is more than simply voting.
Right. Well, ironically that you said that, because I've participated in some other organizations where these people just said we need to give up on electoral politics, and we need to find other ways to force the plutocracy into submitting to the masses. And they said electoral politics may not be the way. Now, what we're seeing, here is, again, like I said, the dynamics. We have to examine the dynamics. I understand where you said, well, a lot of people said they were undecided. But we saw Biden in action in debates. We saw Biden's reaction in many areas. What is occurring with the American body politic? I mean, look, I am watching this in complete.
You're making an assumption that the history has shown us a long line of historic of logical decisions made in voting.
Well, that's you got me on that one.
If we go back and we look at that, we can raise the same kinds of questions of why did they vote? I mean, why did they vote for Trump? Right? Logically, you go back earlier, and when you're talking about losing faith in the electoral process, when we were growing up in the 1960s,
yes,
right? And we had talked about changing the system, and folks got into voting and lost everything, and the development of organizations. You remember one of the things that he was stoked at that time, but Kwame Ture was always saying is that get organized, organize these cells and begin to move for that. You have to do that. You have to develop those organizations. You have to have those agendas, and then you make decisions based upon that agenda and that organization, right? You don't look at a person to, quote, lead you. You develop the organization, then you check, then you decide somebody.
Explain that right? with regards to, let's say, the Bernie movement.
Right. Well, in terms of the Bernie movement, right? Bernie is not going to save the country.
Absolutely not. Right.
Bernie's not going to save the country. If you put all of your belief and faith in a single individual, that individual can be capped.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yes.
And then he's gone. Then what do? But when you have the foundation that is there, you tell that leader, hey, look, no, we selected you. This is what it's going to be. Right.
Dr. Jones, I think that's a prescient statement that we need to get out there, because I can tell you right now there are hundreds of thousands, there are millions right now of millennials right now that tonight will be the most depressing time in their lives, because tonight is going to show them that the power of the plutocracy is great, and they are going to wonder if they, after putting that much faith, let's say, in this particular movement led by Bernie Sanders, they are going to wonder, can they ever really attain that which they're looking for?
Right. They have to understand that they are the movement.
Exactly.
They are the movement. Bernie Sanders is not the movement. Right?
Yes.
And this is what we want to do. This is how we're going to move. This is how socially, politically, economically, all these things are connected, right?
Right.
And so we begin to think about what is our social position within society. How are we behaving economically in the society?
Right.
And then you integrate that with the political process in terms of gaining control of certain segments of the government.
But I need to hold you right there, because I think what we're seeing here, for the young people to understand, is deep and serious. We saw a win from a small state used as the catalyst, the ad by a corporate controlled media to get a gold in framing an argument to a timid, scared people who thought when the mainstream media says this is a race between two people and one of them is going to take us where we don't want to go and we will lose. We had that systemic setup. How are we going to tell the young people to detach themselves from that and then build themselves up with that movement?
Okay, now it didn't start with South Carolina. I mean, the whole question of how
Okay, well, that's true.
right, how the corporate media has framed elections in general in terms of who should rule.
Right.
And so that's very basic. Right? And so once you decide who should rule, then you can go through these other things and say, okay, well, in this state we're going to do this, in this state we're going to do that, this state we're going to do that. And each time you develop a narrative which supports what you're doing. I mean, for example, when you started with covering Iowa, right, and the importance of that and saying where people were and what they were going to do, that becomes it. Now, again, it is when you look at all the successful revolutions that have gone on in the world, I think you see that they have started out with a cadre. Now, oftentimes the cadre fights in the name of the people, but they're really pushing, the cadre in it. Hopefully, at some point, they bring the people along. But they have to begin to understand what is my relationship with this political and economic system, right? Once you understand what that relationship is, then what can I do to change my relationship if I want to, and also raise the question of what is my relationship with the rest of the society,
right?
Because quite frankly, you can be very progressive and be a progressive banker, right?
Right.
And so what you want to do is to begin to say that, okay, the society, the greater society, needs to move in X direction.
Right.
What can I do to help move the society in that particular direction?
Now, when you have a corporate media that make that people continue to have the impact that they have. Luckily, we're at KPFT Pacifica Network. We do our own thing. We are not dependent on dollars from the corporatocracy. When you have such a dominant corporate media in our days, what do we, how do we function? How do we get that out?
You simply, one, you recognize where you are, what your position is.
Mm-hmm.
I always say that you cannot beat the folks who control the system using their tools. You cannot using their tools because they've developed those tools and they know how they work. And so what you have to do is say, what are my alternatives? Do I find a way of having, say, a small individual paper, small individual, TV stations, radio stations, whatever, to try to get my message out.
Right.
But also beginning to think about, okay, inside of this community, I will go and I will interact with these various organizations and get involved in them and try to raise certain kinds of questions. Now, never assuming that you can go into an organization that was designed to do one thing and you're simply going to change it and make it something else.
I tell you, that is a lot of what a lot of us have been advising: going to the Democratic Party, take it over, change it, and get it to. Given that it's a two-party duopoly, right? It's a duopoly right now.
Right, and quite happen when you get in and you change it, then those folks who actually control it just simply move elsewhere, right?
Right.
And so now you have a situation where you have a party that can deliver nothing for you, right? And so you have to develop your own. And once you develop your own, then you can direct what it's going to do. You can direct what your relationships are with the others. Now, this is going to take some time because folks say, well, if you're getting into, quote, win this specific election, right, you're not going to do it. What you're talking about is something that is mass-based, that is a movement, that will take time. Right, and if you get in it thinking that, well, I'm going to save the world tomorrow, that's not going to happen.
It won't happen,
and you'll lose out. You'll become frustrated, and the next thing you know, you'll be a MAGA supporter.
Yeah, if you take a look at what we see our mainstream media doing right now, is that they are in fact displaying a lot of what has been occurring as making Joe Biden inevitable. If you look at what Carville is doing, they're making him inevitable. 33% of the delegates out, and that's what they're attempting to do. Now, like I said before, there are going to be, there are going to be a whole lot of young people out there that are going to feel deceived. They're going to feel that the system came out to work directly against them, and I don't think they would be wrong. And they will also have a distrust, a rightfully so, with the older Gen X's and the baby boomer generations, who one can say is responsible for the condition that they're in, from student loans to having to pay the amount of monies that they pay for college, to the inability to get homes, to the inability to do a whole lot. And one more time, they saw that they could possibly get a chance to get policies that support the things that they need. And here we go again.
Right. But part of that is the problem of people like Sanders, in terms of not giving a full explanation of this is the process. What is happening now is happening all inside of the rules. Right. I mean, there's no trickery. There's none. These are the rules that were in place. Right. And
well, I don't know if I completely agree. I mean, wouldn't you call what the media is doing some sort of a trickery?
Oh, no. And what I mean by the rules is that the media is not separate and apart from,
right,
the power structure that is there. So it is in their interest for these folks to win, as well as the person who's trying to win. And so what they have done is they have created a situation, a set of political rules where the delegates are selected as they are. So people are not being cheated based upon that, right? In terms of our definition of journalism,
right.
And this notion about objective journalism and how you're telling both sides of the story, and you're equating these two sides as being the same, right?
Right.
You are operating in a system which allows,
right,
certain other things to go on, right? And so what I'm saying is that they are all a part of these established rules that are in place that allows this to go. The primary purpose is to promote the continued domination and control.
Repeat that. I think a lot of people don't quite get that.
It is to promote the continued domination and control of the folks who are in power, right? And it's not just simply somebody who's elected to the office of president. Those who control the boards, those who control the economy, those who control the social institutions, they're all in this, right, with the same ultimate objective of maintaining the domination and control they have over the society.
And it's sad.
Yeah. And so when you challenge that, you must know that you are going to be challenged. I mean, when you think of the power that they have to socialize people, to get people to believe that what they're doing is, for example, right now, this whole discussion about whether or not Stiers or Bloomberg or Trump would be better because they are billionaires.
Right.
Or the whole notion of billionaires as some benevolent kind of person who just simply would do good things for
as
folks,
opposed to
right?
having made their money on the backs of and the excess labor of others.
Yeah. And so that is a part of what rulers do, what rulers are doing. And so folks have to find ways to try to socialize young folks that, hey, this isn't perhaps not the best way you should be going in, and you have to organize and struggle to deal with this. You're not going to vote yourself into power.
Right.
Right.
Well, there. I don't know if there's a. In fact, I'm looking for it right now. There is a sociologist that I interview frequently. His name is Roy Adelson, and he writes a whole lot about. He sent me an article today titled "Beware the Bipartisan Legion of Doom: Corporate Democrats and Trump's GOP."
Yeah.
And he articulates in the article exactly. He says, in professional wrestling, the Legion of Doom is a name that conjures up the fearsome physiques and painted faces of one of the great tag teams of all times. I mean, it is so true. And then he enumerates he gave all the techniques, that's used by the plutocracy to, first of all, to have people vote against their own interests, to have people fearful of the things that they can hope for, to have people, in fact, we take a look at the lines that we got, the later lines that we got in the, today in Harris County. And when Judon told me, he said, yeah, Gray, the lines are very, very long, and some other places the lines are very, very long. We know exactly what that meant.
Yes. Yes. And, I mean, there's no way that you can get around it or sugarcoat it or whatever in terms of you are involved in a power game,
Yes.
right? And the folks who have the power will do what is necessary to maintain it. And it is not like one or two people who are sitting up in D.C. or on the West Coast and pulling strings, right? There is a group, a sector of society that is controlling the society, and it interacts with each other and make the decisions that are necessary. Now, yes, there are times when there are conflicts inside of that particular group, right? But the conflicts are not going to be such that they're going to really overturn the control of the total group over the rest of society, right? There might be discussions about how we're going to redistribute, the wealth among ourselves,
Right.
And we will give some other folks some stuff such that they will not challenge our having control, of this wealth. And so it is by design. It's not happenstance. This is the way in which a capitalist society operates, right? And no matter how much we talk about, benign capitalism or benevolent capitalism,
Actually,
or whatever,
Elizabeth
that is
called
that.
it accountable capitalism.
There's no such thing.
Right.
Wait, I'll take that back. It is accountable. I'll take that back. Right? The question is accountable to
who?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Accountable to who?
Right.
Well, going forward, Dr. Jones, I think what we are in for, first of all, my hunch is that, and let me tell you, it seems like Biden just may carry the night. That's what it seems like. Even with California, with the lead that he has now, I don't know if California splits the votes, he may be able to get a slight lead over something that we could not expect. If you take a look at what Bernie Sanders has won so far. So here's what I think we should sort of get to. I think, first of all, I don't see Biden lasting and beating Donald Trump. A lot of people would like to believe that he was the person to beat Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump played the Democrats once again by. I don't know if you remember how they played Gore back in 2000 when they said, we're going to tie him to Clinton. We're going to tie him to Clinton. And then Gore ran away from Clinton, He ran away from the guy, the most popular president then. He ran away from him. And, of course, you know what happened. I think they played the Democratic Party in the fear, in the false fear that Trump has for Biden. I think there's no fear there.
No, I think that the Trump folks feel rather secure in terms of what they believe to be their road to victory. Right?
I think so now. I think, and this makes it official, yeah.
And when you look at some of the opposition that is coming toward them, it doesn't appear to be very strong. Folks cannot vote or are not going to vote Biden for president simply because he was Obama's vice president.
Exactly.
And at the same time, the Democratic Party and Biden and other folks, while they will play up Obama to black folks, at the other time they're going to try to move away to say that, well, I'm not like,
Exactly.
And so this whole notion that comes up in terms of the white nationalism and white superiority in the United States, comes into play.
Right.
I mean, we can never underestimate the importance of that, right? Even among, quote, our, white friends.
Right.
In terms of what are the benefits of being white in the United States and how do you respond to it? That is there's a real difference in terms of how you will be recognized or responded to by those in power based upon the whole racial issue.
Right.
And so one would have to try to say that, well, for example, I can imagine pretty soon Biden is going to try to move away from this whole notion that, and Carville and others, that, black folks save the Democratic Party. This is convenient for right now.
Exactly.
Once they get
actually, it's convenient because there's still more states to vote.
Right. Once they get out of the South, and where they don't have to worry too much about that, then you'll see them begin to move, toward and will come up and say, well, the real key is the suburban voter.
But you know what?
What the key is that.
It is ironic that Clyburn knows this, and he decided, Dr. Eddie Glaude from Princeton University, he went on to meet the press, and he said, I would have never believed that the firewall for Biden, the Democratic Party, would have been South Carolina. He said, I cannot believe that black people would be that firewall to support somebody who likely will not have their interest in policy. I'm paraphrasing, but their interest in policies if ever elected to the office.
Well, and I'm not sure why he would say that, because if you go back and you look at the history of black voting, particularly in the South, everywhere in the United States, really, is that we have always been put in a position of, quote, selecting the lesser of two evils.
Yes.
And if you go back, and I remember going back to Louisiana again, and we had this, Delta Morrison was running for governor against, I think it was Earl Long at the time. And Delta was the friend, and his position was, he had been sued by the NAACP more than anyone else, right? And so you saw this pattern of black voters voting for what they saw was the least objectionable person, right? And so for them to vote, quote, for Biden is no real difference in terms of the whole notion. Look, we don't have we don't have any other good choices there, and so we are going to do this. That comes from the absence of an organized agenda that you put forth, to these
Doesn't
folks.
it also come from an absence of information, an absence of knowledge? Because
No. I mean, Biden has been around long enough.
Yeah.
For folks to know him. He's not someone that's misunderstood. As a matter of fact, many of us were concerned and figured out why Obama selected him in the first place.
I remember.
But then Obama was a centrist, moderate Democrat, and this was consistent with what he was doing, right? And so Biden's role on matters that impacted us has been clear, right? I mean, he has a very, very long record, and people knew about it. They weren't ignorant.
I am not.
What really was the selling point was
Yeah.
that, we had all of this love and hope for Obama, and he was Obama's man, and therefore, we are supporting Biden because he is a part of Obama's legacy. You never saw them say, particularly, well, we are for Biden because of A, B, C, D in terms of policy. It was that this is Obama's legacy, and he's going to continue to do what Obama was doing, right? And it did not get any deeper than that.
Right.
Because,
I think that goes to say that there's a limited knowledge, the knowledge base there.
Well,
I mean, maybe to the extent that yes, he was Obama's guy, but being Obama's guy and what he's going to do for your kid's education, or what he's going to do to relieve your kid of
right.
college.
Right, but when you look at the pattern of voting in the United States, right, in terms
Yeah.
of making these kinds of decisions, this is what we see happening, period.
Yeah, well,
right?
yes,
This is happening,
absolutely.
period, right?
You're right about that.
And so we are traditionally being the same as, quote, Americans
Everybody
do
else,
in the voting,
in other
right?
words, continue to
this is
vote
it.
against our interests.
Right. And this is the socialization that we're going through. So in the absence of that organizations and agenda building, this is what you get.
Right. Well, we don't have any. I'm still trying to. Are you able to see
I
any
can't
better
pick
local
them up.
results?
No.
We still don't have any real local results that yet. Again, it seems like these lines must still be going pretty high. So, are you trying to say something?
Bernie's at 28% versus Joe Biden 24%.
Oh, 28-24. So Bernie is still winning Texas. What percentage of the vote is in?
22.
22%. That doesn't bode well at all.
No, because the one of the areas that is still voting is very active is up in the Austin area. And
Yes.
This is the Bernie's area.
That's
in terms of
Bernie's area.
Young folks and UT. The Hispanic vote is, well, the Hispanic population is large, but most of them are not voters. right? And
Yeah.
this is the big problem in terms of what may eventually become, because there are two problems. One, many being non-citizens, and two, you have a younger population
Right.
that has not decided to get into the voting yet. And so the 28-24 is about what you would expect, coming out. But the way in which the delegates will be assigned, it's still,
Right.
it's not a very big win for Sanders.
Right.
Because again, we're not talking about the popular votes; we're talking about the actual delegates that are going to come out of the process.
Right. Well, let me tell you what is interesting here now. Okay, we saw the Democratic Party make a concerted effort to defeat Bernie Sanders. We saw them pull out all stops. They pulled out the candidates ganged up on Bernie Sanders. The media, the corporate media, ganged up on Bernie Sanders. The party ganged up on Bernie Sanders. In meaning all the party operatives were out there really attacking Sanders. Now we have Carville coming out and saying just maybe Sanders could check it in. Sanders should probably just go ahead and quit. I have this question for you, Dr. Jones. Why would he want to do that? Why would he want to make life easier for those who went ahead and did everything they could?
He wouldn't, because number one, he's really an independent, right?
Right.
And so he has never been a part of that Democratic Party leadership structure, right? Secondly, that he sees himself as leading a movement, and the movement would be greater than the party.
Right.
And so there would be no reason to, quote, sell your movement out for the persons that you're actually campaigning against, that you see as being
right, and who was detrimental
threat,
to
right,
you moving forward,
and a threat to the United States that you see that you want to bring to. And so he would not listen to them in that regard, and he will continue to push the movement. As a matter of fact, if he even tried to, do something like that, he would be so seriously challenged by the folks in the movement that he's led, until that would be a greater tragedy for those young folks and those folks who are trying to
if he were to
about
do
this
that.
stuff.
Yeah, and I really hope that going forward he actually does not do that, because I think more than ever, I think it is essential now, given what the Democratic Party, its operatives, its purchased media, and all these other folks have done to try to undermine one candidate. Let's be clear. This was only done to that one candidate. I think the party now, it is essential, in fact, and I think you said it quite well, I think, and that is that it will do badly for the movement if you go ahead and say acquiesce to the party. Yeah.
And once again, this stresses the importance of having a movement that is based on something more than the individual.
Right.
Because if the individual is capped, then of course the movement scatters. But if you have that movement there, it doesn't really matter what they try to do, that it continues to go and it continues to move. There needs to be people in place who are going to push it. I mean, for example,
right.
some of the other persons who've been coming up, like Cortez and others.
Ocasio-Cortez and Ayanna Presley, Ian Omar, and
right. They have to really begin to play a much greater role in trying to push this forward,
yes.
right? And not allow it to be a single person movement, because that is what kills movements.
It is essential, Dr. Jones, going forward, and I think I love what you had to say. It is essential for the movement, because it is essential now that this movement continues, and it is essential that this movement grows, because what we've seen now is how the party is able to coalesce all the different parts of this plutocracy to cause harm to most, as they have most support them.
Right. I mean, they need to study what happened to us
right
in the 1960s and early 1970s.
And tell us a little bit about that, yeah.
Well, we, coming out in 1964, 65, 66, 67, we saw two things happening.
Right.
We saw the development of the Black Power movement that went into the 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
We saw the counterculture movement, quote, hippies, stuff that was going on that actually challenged a lot of the mores. And it was designed to deal in part with the Vietnam War, right?
Right.
And so at some point we saw these two movements about to coalesce,
Right.
the Black Power movement along with the sort of counterculture movement, and the anti-war movement, right? And this was a progressive was going on. A lot of the initial gun control legislation was designed to deal with the Black Panther Party.
Exactly.
Right?
In other words, oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so we saw this happening, and we saw them begin to challenge that. One of the things that happened when the Congressional Black Caucus was formed, and also when we had the National Black Political Conventions coming on. Initially, the black elite would not participate, right? Until they saw this was a meaningful kind of thing. Then they all decided to jump in and then try to turn it into a political operation.
Right.
And the CBC came out of it. And then they tried to push away the Panthers and other folks who began to raise the much more serious questions about systemic change
Right.
in the society. And so even some of the corporate people began to pay for black organizations to participate in
order to control them.
Right. And so that happened. And so you see the same kind of thing happening. Is that
the CBC is also controlled, isn't it?
Yeah. And so what you see is that these young folks did not realize the power they were dealing with, and they allowed themselves in many cases to be co-opted. A lot of the folks who we see a little funny thing, used to joke about wearing afros, who had no use for quote that hair, right? Then all of a sudden, all these brothers had these big bushes, and we used to make a distinction in terms of what we call a natural and an afro.
Right.
Natural was your hair was natural. An afro was when it was neatly coiffed and
right.
all this stuff. And politically, there was something in that in terms of how people identify with that Procter and Gamble took over a whole lot of the stuff in terms of trying to say what would be the true definition of black power, right? And so then we began to see, the development of, quote, black capitalism and all these kinds of things. And so you begin to see the co-optation of these very progressive forces.
Right.
And so it kept moving and moving, moving. And now, we are these very conservative baby boomers who are now talking about these young folks doing this stuff. I mean, like, even music, what you could not sing. Right. I always kid myself because I was, getting on my son about some of the rap stuff. This was back in much earlier.
Right.
And this was Daddy. You listen to Clarence Carter, right?
And then you went ahead and listened to the words and said, "Did we say that?
Did we say that?" Right? Yeah. And so you make these kinds of distinctions, and so they, I think, may have more access to a lot of information than we have, and they might be able to avoid the mistakes that we made in terms of being co-opted so easily. At least I hope that is the case.
Wow. Now, it is funny because now Biden says he thinks he's going to win California.
Hey, very well could be.
Well, I don't know. This is a very strange night,
Yeah, and that really would be the last nail for.
Well, I mean, it would
in terms of quote trying to get.
Yes, if he loses California, it is unlikely that it's unlikely
Nowhere
they
else.
have the not unlikely he won't have the majority, but the interesting thing about it is what we have to. I think those of us that are responsible older Gen Xers, responsible baby boomers, we have to understand what's going on with our young people right now. And I think it's incumbent upon those of us that have that moral fortitude and that mindset that understands that we have wronged these younger folk for decades now, since even to some extent even previous to the Ronald Reagan Revolution, but again exacerbated by the Ronald Reagan Revolution. I think we have a lot of work to do with these young people, because absent building them up and not having them just take what I would have to consider these several losses as something for that becomes what they think is their destiny would be problematic.
Yeah, I think we created a plateau where we decided that we had done these things, that we had moved the world in this particular direction, and we wanted folks to come along with them and stopped. And stopped doing. We became so infatuated with who we were and what we had done until we refused to accept any basic questions coming from those who were behind us.
Right.
And they had some very legitimate issues about what we had done and how we need to move forward. And we actually stifled that. And I think much of the issues that we, quote, see with them today is partly our doing.
Yeah.
Now, society changes, social media, all these other kinds of things that are going on. And while we did not necessarily stay abreast of all that, and they have, we have to try to figure out some kind of way, how do we reconnect
Yes.
with these young folks, and how do we listen to them and try to talk with them in terms of what we think ought to be, as opposed to coming in and dismissing them and saying that, you're good for nothing, and you haven't followed our lead. And, for example,
4 minutes.
One of the things that I've always talked about is us socializing young folks to tell them that they should vote because somebody died for them to vote.
Right.
You vote with the expectation of getting something out of that vote. Yes, you recognize, you support the folks who helped you to get it, but voting is designed to get something out of it. There's some material benefit that's associated with that. Never lose sight of that. And just simply voting for the sake of voting does not necessarily move you politically to where you need to be.
I think that is so important because a lot of times that is what we used to tell the younger folk, right? Somebody died for you to vote, so go vote. But no, you're absolutely right. We have to go and vote for a purpose, for a reason, for an outcome. And a lot of young people went out there to vote for an outcome they were expecting. A lot of these young people are disappointed with the outcomes in several places. Well, of course, we still don't know what Texas or California is going to bring for sure. But what we need to press on to those young people that are listening to us right now is, folks, it's a
organization.
I say that again.
Organization.
It's all about organization. It's about never, ever giving up. It's about understanding that you get hits. It's understanding that the plutocracy does not go down without a fight. The plutocracy will never give in without a fight. So the one thing we have to understand, Dr. Jones, is if we want change is not going to be handed to us on a platter. We have to be actively involved in that change.
And take it.
Say that again, please.
Take it.
You have to take your change. So, folks, we have about 2 more minutes left here. I want to thank you guys for listening to us today. Again, I'm here with Dr. Franklin Jones. Why don't you tell us in 30 seconds or something a little bit about where, what have you been into? What are you about?
Well, I'm a retired professor from Texas A&M University in political science, and I've been active in Houston for quite a bit, done a lot of analysis, and tried to stay in touch with the progressive movement.
And that is so important, folks. And I of course, I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, Tuesdays at 3 o'clock.